Hello and welcome back. This is MC1 Gamer. Today I want to discuss the new Undead Legions. This is the new army that is in the Nagash books for end times, and it's a great time to be a VC player, a Vampire Counts player, or a Tomb Kings player. Whether or not you subscribe to the fact that this is a new legal army, if it's just specific to the campaign setting, you must accept the fact that a lot of TOs, a lot of tournament organizers are allowing this army or testing it. And it's probably going to become much more common and something that you're going to either be looking to play or you're going to have to deal with on the other side of the table. Please feel free to join in the conversation. Please, of course, be civil, but also it's important because that you do join in the conversation, because this is not just for undead players or Vampire Counts players or Tomb King players. This is also for those opponents who are going to be facing those armies and those combinations, and they're going to need to prep for it should this be something that is going to be allowed. And it's very likely that that's going to be the case. I'm hearing from a lot of people that are much more widely traveled to game areas, regions, to GTs, that a lot of TOs are accepting it, whether or not they accept the 50% Lord's Rule or not. The Undead Legions is becoming much more commonplace or much more universally accepted, or they're just testing it out to see how it shakes out. And that's very much like what happened with the Chaos Dwarves, too. So we're very likely to see this become much more, before we even see a 9th edition come out, which could either completely erase it as an option or could completely put a stamp on it and say, hey, this is another one of those armies, so another army option. So let's take a look for the purposes of this discussion and see what exactly is involved, what kind of new combinations are out there. This was all inspired, by the way, initially by one of the local players, Cameron, who had seen an article on I think it was written by Hero, I believe it was, on Bell of Lost Souls. And our follow-up discussions, I've had a number of discussions with a number of other players, people who have looked into this just because they want to prep for it, but they don't play Undead. People who have multiple armies and may have a VC or a TK army as a secondary army. Now, me, I used to play Undead back when they were a singular book combining these two army themes. And I also played Bretonnians back then. And I took about a 15-plus year break, and when I returned, hey, within the first year, Nagash is back, and Undead Legions is now back too. Now, all I need is a brand new Brett's book, and I will be absolutely on cloud 9. So, okay, let's take a look at this a little bit more. Some of the general changes you already know. You've heard about it, you've read about it, you've seen people discuss it on forums. So I'm going to go over that just to review it real quickly, but then I'll go into right afterwards some of the additions and some of the combinations that I've been taking a look at and that I've been hearing a lot of other people discussing. So first of all the references to Nehek Undead or a Vampire Counts Undead are just now universally accepted as Undead. Any references to those in their specific army books are now just accepted to be Undead. So they all apply now to the combined list of Undead Legions. That includes spells, magic items, special rules, and some of the rules that are specifically either limiting to one army, like the Tomb Kings not being able to march. Now they can march if they're within 12 inches of their general. They're no longer a stationary army or an army that's just going to sit back and shoot, for the most part, waiting for you to come to them. They can now move, and that's going to open up tremendous amounts of possibilities for Tomb Kings. For both armies, loss of the general, if the general is defeated, no longer results in army-wide crumble tests. This is, in my opinion, the single biggest change for Undead Legions versus what I play, Vampire Counts. Everybody says that the way to take out the Vampire Counts or the Tomb Kings is to go for the general. What I call sacking the quarterback. You go for you're looking to just basically go for this one figure. And as tough as those figures are, the Vampire Lord is a very capable and strong figure, but killable. And he's also a caster. So if you use him, and I have definitely had this happen on more than one occasion. I had it happen actually twice at a a tournament where I just threw 2 dice at a spell, and of course they came up 6s, and I got sucked into the warp, and that is crushing. And a lot of people could say, oh, it's the trade-off with immunopsychology and all these other benefits that you get. Everybody causes fear, and I understand all those points, and I agree with them. But the single thing that always seems to happen with vampire counts, specifically in my experience, and with Tomb Kings as well, is that if you do lose these characters, and characters die, even the toughest of characters go down in these games, it is basically an automatic loss. And that is something that, having removed, allows these armies to become, at the very minimum, more competitive and more fun. And I don't believe that it's going to change the meta so much that the Undead Legions is going to suddenly become a top tier or top of the top tier army. There's still plenty of counters out there. But let's talk about what some of the really crazy benefits and builds are that are as a result of this now combined army list. So in my discussions, I've been told about a number of different builds that people are throwing around, and there's a couple of different ways that players are approaching this. You can either look to do a true blend, a true mix of vampire counts and Tomb Kings for an absolute Undead Legion list, or you could focus on one book or the other and just have a sprinkling of the alternate book. And in my case, vampire counts, what a lot of people have been saying is now we have a little bit more shooting. We have some war machines that we can throw into the mix. We have archers, skeleton archers, or skeleton horse archers. This gives us so much more dimension than before, where we were just simply not a shooty army. The best shooting we had was Screams from the Terrorgeist, which is, let's be honest, the glass cannon. I mean, if the thing takes wounds, it's going to be less effective. If it doesn't, it's going to ruin your day. But as soon as it starts taking wounds, and it can be removed very easily to cannon fire or shooting in turn 1. But this is really the best that we had. And then, of course, some Screams from Banshees or the Mortis engine. We do have some capabilities, but they're really limited, and we have to get very much up there, and they're easily countered. This gives us a whole dimension of being able to take off chaff, being able to deal with wood elves, who they run us around in circles. Now we can at least try to shoot them down, to thin out units before we get to them. It's a huge boon for the vampire counts. For the Tomb Kings, well, we've already talked about how now they can march, but there's items now that they have access to. The Black Periap, I never pronounced that correctly, where you can store 2 dice. They've already got a great benefit with the casket. Oh, and let me not forget the casket for the vampire counts. How could I forget the casket? The vampire counts now taking the casket to allow us to generate additional power dice. You combine that now with the Black Periap. Now you have the ability to store extra dice, and that gives you, maybe not an advantage, but allows you to level the playing field on your opponent's magic phase. Huge benefits. And I've also seen a lot of people talk about how they might take the Blasphemous Tome upgrade on the Mortis engine, which I don't usually like to do very much. It does give you a +2 to any of your casters within range that use the lore of vampires, which is nice. That's a great ability. You take a level 2 necromancer, and now they're casting at level 4. The downside is that if they miscast, your opponent can pick and choose which miscast that they're going to take. And what do you think they're going to take? They're going to take "You got sucked into the warp." Absolutely. They may take. There's certainly a chance, if it's just a level 2, they may take the catastrophic explosion ones because they want to try and destroy some troops. But in most cases, they just want to remove that guy from the board. So for armies that are skewed either for VC or Tomb Kings, some of the things I've looked at again are double Vampire Lord with 2 Night Buses. You can do that, and especially if the 50% Lords is allowed. I mean, that's a crazy list. It's already a viable list. Certainly has its limitations with anything that ignores armor. The Night Bus is really just an avenue to bring your Lord, your Vampire Lord, into combat so they're protected as much as possible from shooting and cannon fire, just to get them survive enough so they can get in there and do some killing. Now you have 2 of them. That's crazy. I cannot wait to see how that works once I get enough of my Black Knights. I'm still working on my first 10 Black Knights and getting them ready to be fielded for some battle reports and some campaigns. But the idea of having that, now have to make 2 of them, well, that's just going to double my work, but I cannot wait to try it out and see how it works. Another one that I'm seeing is Grave Guard with the Banner of the Barrows and a Tomb King. And we'll go over some of that in just a minute. And then there's the regen list. I mean, there's already a big regen list with the vampire counts where you have double mortis engines, or at least you take a mortis engine with your crypt horrors, so that now they're 5-up is 4-up regen. But now let's take a look at mortis engines combined with crypt horrors, but with undead constructs. When you're within range of a necrotect, the necrotect gives those constructs a 6+ base. And it's not uncommon that you see VC players take just a cheap talisman, I think it's a talisman, that gives them a 6+ regen, and then the mortis engines now make them 5+ or 4+, so that they can take less magic items, more killy stuff or countering stuff, and they have now a nice defense, which is great for White Kings, I meant to say, because they're already toughness 5 with a bunch of wounds. Now let's talk about undead constructs with mortis engines, because if they're in range of the necrotech, they get that 6 bonus. Now they can go to 5+ a 5+ regen, or even 4+ regen, and undead constructs already are huge benefits on the battlefield. They can hold up entire units. But we'll get to all of that. Let's move on to spells and item combinations. First one I want to talk about really revolves around combinations where you get to increase your movement, and that's a big deal for undead, because whether your vampire counts or your Tomb Kings, both of them have limitations in terms of movement with their individual books. Vampire counts mitigate it by virtue of the fact that they can, within 12 inches, they can make normal moves near their general. There's even a battle scroll that allows you to have your battle standard bearer, a White King battle standard bearer, also be kind of another bubble for that, but you'd have to go and buy the battle scroll. The Tomb Kings can't march with their individual book, so now they can, but let's see how these normally viewed as slow-moving armies are extremely fast. Spells and items specifically are the things that make this army lightning fast if they can get away with it. Now you have offsets. You have to take certain spells, you have to take certain items. But if you're looking to make a fast-moving army, you have the potential to do it, and you will get some spells off. And if you can muster the forces right in your enemy's face, especially when you have large hordes of these fear and potentially terror-inducing units, you could really just break the back of your opponent. So let's take a look at how you might do that and what really this means. Van Hal's Dance, Lore of Vampires. 6+ cast, really cheap. It's not a signature spell, and you can use it either to affect a single unit or model, or you can bubble it out. And this provides you with an 8-inch move. And this is very commonly used by vampire counts to try and get several of their units right up in your face, or to take units that may be in range of shooting or of being charged and then push them in the magic phase out of range. Okay, so this is great for units like the Hex Wraiths. This is great for units like the Terrorgeist. You scoot all the way up there, and if you manage to have a caster that's kind of running behind it, you can throw up a spell that then places your Terrorgeist behind enemy lines, and that is never going to be the place where you want your Terrorgeist to be. So that's one. Let's also take a look at something like the Tomb Kings. This is a signature spell on the Tomb Kings, Incantation of Desert Winds. This is on an 8+, to allow movement for all units within 12 inches and allow them to make a normal move. And if you're within range of your general, you can march. All right. If you have to test for marching because you're right in within range of enemy units, that's all. That's fine, well and good. But it still is a regular move, and that is crazy, because if you can get down a bubble Van Hales and then a bubble Incantation of Desert Winds. Actually, it's not a bubble. It's just within 12 inches. At an 8+ and a 6+ for the Van Hales, that's a lot of movement on top of your regular movement. And Incantation can be boosted up to 24 inches if you want to go 16+ on casting. That's a pretty steep hill to climb, but it's still doable. Now let's take a look at some other spells, like the Lore of Undeath. The spell is called Morkarn. and I can't pronounce any of the Lord of the Death spells, but some of them still have great synergy. This one is on a 6+ and allows one friendly unit within 12 inches. First of all, it allows them to heal back die 3+1 wounds, which is nice. But it then allows them to get one free normal move. Still, they can make another move, another full move, and that could be something that you could be healing back maybe one Hex Wraith, and then boom, they can do a Soul Stride. That's huge. Now let's talk about magic items that might come into play. Every Vampire Counts player knows about the Book of Archon. This is a 25-point item that allows you to cast a bound spell on a 3+ for Van Hal's Dance. So, just like the Van Hal's Dance as a regular spell, now you get an extra one that only can be used on a single unit, but it's another 8-inch move. What if you have a 10-strong unit of Hex Wraiths? These Hex Wraiths could be dancing in and out. You'd have 2 or 3 of their Soul Strides. That's massive. That could be 10 Strength 5 hits, no armor save, magical flaming. That's monstrous. Okay, so unless you're dealing with the Banner of the World Dragon, that's brutal. Okay, and then doing it 2 or 3 times. And you can get, by the way, the signature spell from the Incantation of the Desert Winds with just a level 1 Lich. And that's not a terribly expensive character. It's like taking a baby necromancer. So moving on from that, let's talk about some of the other combos that we've been hearing, reading about, or discussing. The biggest one that I've been hearing about is combinations that enhance the Graveguard. The Graveguard already very tough with toughness 4, strength 4. They always strike less because they have great weapons, but they strength at they're at strength 6 with the great weapons. Some people take them with sword and shield, which there's certainly a viability to it, but I always seem to take it with the great weapons because they have tremendous punch, and I don't care if they're going to get ripped apart by other units. I mean, they have a toughness 4. That's not so bad, but I can heal them back up, and they're elite troops, so the ability to just bring them back from the dead is very disheartening to your opponent. So now, I like to take them with that strength 6. I don't care that they're going to get killed. I want to make sure that they can do the damage to your opponent, and it's usually very good when it comes when you're dealing with high toughness or multi-wound opponents too. When it comes to elves or men or whatever, yeah, I could see definitely a viability with a sword and shield, because you're going to get Killing Blow. You're already at strength 4, which is good, so you're wounding on 3s, and then you get the defensive benefits: 6+ ward from parry, and a 4+ armor and shield, heavy armor and shield. Yeah, I could see that, but let's just talk about it in terms of the great weapon. So you're always going to strike last, but you're at toughness. You're at strength 6. You put the Banner and the Barrows in there, and they're weapon skill 4. And now you're going to be hitting things on almost exclusively a 3+. Some you might hit on a 2+, but because you might already have a higher weapon skill. But let's say you're dealing with other elite troops, elves, or other maybe characters, and they have a weapon skill 5 or 4 or 6 or higher, or whatever. You're going to be hitting now on 3+ instead of just the basic 4+, and that's pretty good. Let's throw some other things in the mix. A lot of conversation has been about throwing a Tomb Prince into the mix, because now you bump that up to weapon skill 5, okay? And you can take a Tomb King, which is a lot more expensive, but now they impart the ability of whatever their weapon skill is to the entire unit they're in. So now you have Graveguard +1 to hit at weapon skill 6, strength 6. Yes, they're always strike last, but they're pretty much hitting on 2s in most cases, wounding on 2s in most cases. Now it's potentially even throw a Necrotect in there, and the unit has Hatred. Let's also potentially, if you may or may not have that, but what about casting Van Hal's Dance on them? Now you have rerolls to hit, and you could potentially have Incantation of Righteous Smiting from the Tomb King's magic, and give them another +1 to attack. So you may not have all these immediately. You may have to build to this stuff, but the combinations therein give you the ability to hit, the ability to wound easily, the ability to re-roll, and just a tremendous amount of killing damage on this unit. And of course you're going to take it at Horde formation. Let's also take a look at some other enhancements. Yes, your striking, it always strikes last. right? Well, how about putting in a corpse cart in the mix? A lot of these vampire count lists have a corpse cart. It's kind of weak. It's got low toughness, only a toughness 4, and it's only got, I believe, if I remember correctly, 4 wounds. But any augment will launch that special rule for the corpse cart, and that imparts always strikes first to all units now within range. I think it's within 6 inches of the corpse cart. Now you're going to strike first, and that could be very big for Undead. You're imparting losses on units that could be more elite or less in number, and they're not going to have as many strikes back. But let's take a look at a situation. Worst case scenario, you're up against elves, and they also have always strikes first. Well, it's going to go at initiative, so it's kind of counters it, and you're still going to lose out because the elves are going to always strike. They're not going to always strike first. They're going to go on a faster initiative. They may not get the rerolls, which could be a huge deal, but they're still going to strike before you. Well, if you can get off, and it's a freebie, you just need the corpse cart in range. If you can get that off and have always strikes first on that or other units in the area, what if you took a lich who has access, a lich priest that has access to the lore of light, and you're able to get the speed of light? You could throw initiative 10 down on that unit. You're going to go first. Strength 6, pretty much in most cases wounding on 2s, and you're pretty much all going to be hitting on 2s, maybe even getting rerolls. You even could go even one step further and throw in a Staff of Damnation somewhere nearby, which is a bound spell at casting level 4. And so you throw 2 dice at it, you're almost guaranteed to get it, unless you just have a crappy roll like I seem to always have. And this gives you extra attacks for every undead unit within 6 inches. And it really only applies to the front ranks, because you can't get it in secondary ranks, unless maybe you're monstrous infantry. But if it's Grave Guard or any other units, we're talking about the ability now to get more attacks. So if you have a horde formation, your 10 front now have 20 attacks. So think about everything I just said, and everybody in the front rank now is Killing Blow, Strength 6, 2 attacks each. I definitely think that opponents are going to need to figure out and think about how to counter some of these. So the next combination that I had been looking at is any combination that involves the Necrotect and Undead Constructs with Mortis engines. So let's take a look at what some of the rules are. A Necrotech from the Tomb Kings that is within 12 inches of an Undead Construct imparts to that Undead Construct a 6+ regen. And if you have a Mortis engine in range, now, as I mentioned earlier, you can now bump it up for each Mortis engine. So you could go with a 2 Mortis engine list, and you could bump that up to a 5+ or as much as a 4+. That's huge. That is absolutely huge. These are already, the Tomb King Undead Constructs are already absolutely brutal. They have multiple wounds, strength, high strength, toughness 6, toughness 8. They usually have magical abilities on top of that. They're very, very worthy to be put on the field. They're expensive. Of course, you're going to have to make the decision where they're coming out of, what you're not taking within a reasonable list of 2,500 points or 2,400 points, depending on what your meta is. But still, it's something to consider, because if you take that double Mortis engine list, you can really do a lot with just by taking a Necrotect with one of these constructs, or even a single Mortis engine. And you have the extra ability of the fact that they crumble less, so they crumble 1 less, and they crumble 2 less if there's a BSB within 12 inches range. And if you take a unit of Morghasts, which does stack, they may not stack with each other based on some people's interpretation, but they sure stack with other instances of reducing crumble. It specifically says that. So if you have a Morghast unit within range, they're gonna reduce 3 crumbling. And then maybe you have a special character, and that's gonna be that also does that. That could be reducing 4 crumbling. Now that's huge on a unit on a construct that usually is outnumbered and is dealing with static combat res. Now their ability to survive is profoundly magnified. So the last thing I wanted to bring up was terror and fear and things like screaming lists. Against units specifically that aren't immune to psychology, fear and terror are already a big issue when you have Tomb Kings or vampire counts. But let's take a look at how we can make it a little bit worse. The Golden Death Mask of Carnut from the Tomb Kings list removes the ability to use the General's Inspiring Presence or the BSB's reroll ability. This is very, very powerful and very useful for the Tomb Kings. How about when we use it for the vampire counts? And let's, again, ramp it up. Why don't we throw in maybe an Aura of Dark Majesty from vampires, whether a lord or a hero, that reduces that by 1, their leadership? Or let's throw a fear, the fear enhancing banner, the screaming banner, into a unit of skeletons. And that requires tests. Instead of on a 2 die, it's on a 3 die. You take the 2 worst. So we can actually enhance those fear bombing lists and the terror bombing lists that are out there by virtue of the fact that these lists now can combine with abilities. There's a lot of synergy here, also with Doom and Darkness, with Death Magic. And one of the nice things about the Golden Death Mask is that if you have a Terrorgeist or a Banshee using their screams, you can remove. Now, they don't get rerolls because of BSBs, but the common accepted rule is that the General's Inspiring Presence allows for the General's leadership to be used on units when your Terrorgeist goes in there and tries to scream it off the board. Now you can combine that with a character that has the Golden Death Mask. They don't get the General's Inspiring Presence, and they could also have minuses to their leadership because of a vampire might be nearby with an Aura of Dark Majesty. It's already dangerous having 2d6 plus 6 if you have a healthy, unwounded Terrorgeist screaming on an elite unit or an expensive unit or a big character on a mount. Now you have the ability to remove that higher leadership. This is huge when you're talking about orcs and goblins. This is another way that you can benefit from the combined lists of Tomb Kings and vampire counts. What are yours? Tell us your combos. There's probably several of them out there. You've probably been reading about a lot of the different posts that people have been putting on various different websites or conversations that people have had on forums. There's got to be more. I've only covered a few that I've read about, had discussions about, and I'd love to hear more about yours and what your opinions are. So please share, and of course, if you like this, feel free to express that by clicking like. Of course, joining the conversation with commenting, and if you want to see more of this and the various other battle reports and campaign synopses and analysis that I put up, I'm going to be doing stuff on a number of things, including X-Wing, and even some unboxings for my son's favorite game, Disney Infinity, which I'm thrilled about because now it has superheroes, and maybe even some HeroClix stuff. So if you want to follow me, please feel free to subscribe, and thank you for tuning in and watching. Have a great day.